describe the weather for you, but it's a little bit perfect. So next slide, please. We'll take a look at our introduction slide. My name is Elissa Caruth. I am the department chair for the Letters Department, which is a multidisciplinary department. We have American Sign Language, Spanish, and English, and I am a professor of English. And my colleague Lisette, who is also the associate department chair, is presenting with me. So Lisette, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, I am Lisette Davies-Ward. I've been teaching at Oxnard College for the last 3 going on 4 years, and I absolutely love it. And you will be learning some of the reasons why as we progress through this presentation, as far as being an adjunct, or I prefer the term part-time professor, and in an environment and in a climate that is very supportive of the adjunct or part-time teaching colleague, where there isn't this tends to be a typical divide in other institutions of higher education between full-time and part-time professors.
Okay, super. So we'll move on to our next slide. And can you all hear me okay? Okay, super. So I'd like to explain a little bit the title of the presentation as the Rhodes Scholar. Before I was a full-time faculty member, I worked at 4 different colleges in Southern California, and on the weekends I worked at the mall. So I worked 7 days a week to make ends meet. And the joke was that I was a Rhodes Scholar, not a Rhodes Scholar, though I would very much have loved that distinction. So please understand, this is all due respect to actual Rhodes Scholars. That's not me. I was a freeway flyer. So my car became everything. I had filing crates in my trunk. I had different classes for different schools. Everything was in my car. My car was a diner. It was a storage unit. It was a classroom. I decided that I would learn how to speak Spanish while I was driving. So not only was I eating and thinking about my next lesson plan, driving 50 miles in between colleges where I was teaching, but I was also listening to my Spanish CDs and probably Ricky Martin. So my life as an adjunct was quite arduous. It was quite difficult driving between multiple campuses. I would easily spend 10% of my full take-home pay on gas and car maintenance. I also had to have a 5th job working at the mall so that I could make ends meet. And all of this was without insurance. So once I became a contract faculty member, not only was I relieved, but I was absolutely grateful. And for 21 years that I've been working at Oxnard College, not a day doesn't go by that I'm grateful for my job. Once I became the department chair, I thought I'm going to do the best I can to represent all of my colleagues, whether full-time or part-time. To me, my colleagues are my colleagues and my family. Next slide, please. So I'd like to provide a little bit of context for you about the environment in which I became the department chair. Oops, you went forward one. Go back one, please, to the department chair with the unhappy emoji. Uh-oh, we've lost our screen.
Apologies about that. It will be back in a second.
That's okay. I can talk a little bit about the context for how I became department chair and why I decided to volunteer for this role. So I came from a department that I will politely say was a bit autocratic. And it was under, there we go, there's my unhappy emoji. It was a bit inequitable. In other words, we had a department chair who would bring us information and say, what do you think? And if we said anything, we were verbally eviscerated. And as a result, our department was inequitable, which I put twice. Apparently, I was very emphatic about saying it was inequitable. It was inequitable to all faculty. Faculty were excluded. If you disagreed with the existing department chair at that time, like I just gave the example, for a disagreement, you were verbally eviscerated. And as a result, our department stagnated. I can give you an example of what I mean by a disagreement, and it's so petty. I wanted to put a word limit on my assignments, so 250 words a page. So I wanted to ask for a 750 word assignment, 3 pages. I got into a yelling match with the existing department chair because instead of saying 3 pages, I wanted to say 750 words. After that yelling match, I was pretty quiet. So that's an example of what the previous department chair ran the department like. This was a department that had the same person overseeing things for about 2 decades. So when I volunteered to become department chair, it was for several reasons. One, I was the only one who said, I'll do it, because I didn't appreciate the way that we were being managed. And I have some guiding principles that I've developed over the last 5 years. I'm still a very new department chair or department lead, so I'm still learning a lot. And I'd like to put this into another context. I had absolutely no mentorship when I became the department chair. I sought out my colleague, my predecessor, and I would ask this person for advice. And what would end up happening is that I would be verbally abused for an hour. And I thought, you know, I have more important things to do with my time than let you belittle me and abuse me. So I learned by doing, and I learned on my own. And as a result, some of the things that you see on the screen in front of you are what my guiding principles are, what my philosophy is. It's my intention that everybody in my department feels included, because I know what it's like to feel as if I'm on the outside. I think it's very important that everybody in my department collaborates with one another across contract designations, whether you're full-time or part-time. I think it's important that we communicate and we have diverse and dissenting voices, because that is interesting and fair and valid and ethical. I'm transparent in what I offer my colleagues. I'm data-driven and I'm honest. And sometimes this creates a lot of discomfort for me, because I can recognize why my predecessor might have done things the way he did. Sometimes it's easier to work in a vacuum and just make a decision, especially if it's at 11 o'clock at night or after hours and I can't reach my department. So there's a lot of discomfort. There's also a lot of discomfort when working with personnel matters. I'm not a dean, so I'm not permitted to engage in HR or personnel matters, but that doesn't mean I don't have somebody coming to my office crying and asking me why. Or I might have to make uncomfortable decisions. That's my discomfort, and that's part of my growing process, and I own that. And if I do something wrong, I also apologize for it. So to me, it's important that my entire department is involved in the decision-making process. And the other thing that I reiterate to my colleagues is that what drives us is what is in the best interest of our students, and that is what informs our decision-making process. So that's a little bit of context for my philosophy and how I approach things in my department. Next slide, please. What I try to do when I welcome a new faculty member into the department is to be as inclusive as I possibly can. And again, just a quick reminder, I oversee a multidisciplinary department, so there's 3 disciplines: American Sign Language, English, and Spanish. I sit in on all of these interviews and I'm part of the hiring process. One of the things I think is so important when we have somebody new in the department is to include that faculty member right away. In the time before coronavirus, I would invite faculty to campus. I don't care when it is, weekends, summer, and I would provide people with a campus tour. And I would take them all over campus, introduce them to campus police, copy center, dean, president, vice president, whoever I ran into. The other thing that I think is so important about doing that is it creates a welcoming environment so that the new campus you're on isn't unfamiliar day one. And I will take my new colleagues to the classrooms where they might be teaching so that they know where they are. We'll go into the classroom. I'll show them the technology. I want to try and make my new colleague feel as comfortable as possible on campus. Sometimes what I do as well is share my course materials. Lisette might speak to this as well because she and I have exchanged plenty of materials over the years that we've worked together. But I'm very happy sharing anything that I have or created with my new colleague because getting into a new college environment or a new job can be challenging in and of itself. And if I can help contribute to making my new faculty member, my new colleague feel welcome and comfortable, maybe providing them with lesson plans I've used in the past that are successful, by all means, I'm going to do that again. And I'm very open. I have no problem sharing my own experiences with my new colleagues, just as I've shared with you about some of my negative experiences in the past. And finally, I try to be there as much as I possibly can for my new colleagues. And I was so delighted watching the inaugural speaker when the summit started. And she talked about reaching out to our students. And yes, it takes work to reach out to our students. I have typically, in addition to my department chair duties, approximately 100 students that I manage every semester in the classes that I teach. And just as much as I reach out to every student individually, I reach out to my colleagues individually. I want them to know I'm there for them and that I support them. And yes, that takes work, especially when I'm busy too. But myself having been an adjunct, I know how isolating and lonely it can be. So it's important for me to understand that if I have a new faculty member or if I have a colleague who's working at 3 different colleges, I want them to know that they can rely on me, that I'm there for them. So I'll send out emails to the department, I'll send out emails to individual faculty just to check in and say, hey, how are you doing? Can I help you? So these are some of the things that I try to do to be inclusive with some of my colleagues. Next slide, please. Okay, and I think Lisette is probably planning on talking about some of these things as well. When I was an adjunct, I did not feel protected at all in any of the colleges that I worked at. And I have some hair-raising experiences that I could share with you, but that's for a virtual cocktail hour. That's not for this experience or this presentation. But one of the things that many faculty feel, and rightly so, is that we are exploited beyond the parameters of our contract. And I find that that happens frequently with part-timers. Let me provide you with an example. Oftentimes, if a full-time faculty needs a substitute, that falls on the shoulders of a part-timer. And by all means, I want my adjunct colleagues to make as much money as they possibly can. But where the exploitation may come in is with the expectation that that adjunct colleague will do the lesson planning and grading and do everything above and beyond just the classroom instruction that they're being paid for. And I've had to iron out situations in the past and work with management to try and secure, number one, an understanding that this is not acceptable, or to secure more funding to pay adjuncts what they're worth. So, which is priceless. So the other thing that I want to protect my colleagues from, other than exploitation, is from bullying, either from other colleagues or from students or from administrators. All due respect to my administrator coworkers, they work very hard and I respect them and I admire them. But every now and then, there's a little bit of exploitation, and I definitely don't want my adjunct colleagues to feel like they're not protected or supported. So I found that I've had to step in any number of occasions and make very clear boundaries. The other thing that I like to do with my adjunct colleagues is encourage. So, for example, Lisette and I work very well together all the time, and I like to encourage what I call useful participation, which is something like presenting at this summit. This is something that both Lisette and I can benefit from. This is something we can both learn from. This is something that helps us both build our CVs so that basically Lisette's more marketable now. And if any of you want to hire her, I think, I would hate to lose her, but she's a phenomenal person to work with. Or paid participation. If I can secure funding to pay for any number of activities on campus, I will do that. I also have lacked mentors when I was a younger teacher and when I was a newer teacher. So it's another intention that I have to mentor my adjunct colleagues if they're open to it. I don't want to be presumptuous, but I want them to know I'm there. And another thing I've noticed over the last few years is that I've seen a lot of mentorship between my adjunct colleagues with one another, and that is absolutely delightful for me to see. So I want us to be teammates and to work together and to mentor one another. I don't have all the answers. So when I work with a colleague like Lisette, she gave me fabulous information for how we can make this presentation livelier, because she teaches speech communication and I don't. So we mentor each other. It's a reciprocal relationship. Next slide, please. Okay, now I'm going to pass it over to my fabulous colleague, Lisette. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So I did a then and now scenario so that you could see just some bullet points here. What I'll do in the next 2 or 3 slides is just home in on a few of those bullets, because there's obviously a time limit. We don't have all that time to go into all of these different bullet points. When I was asked to join Lisa in this presentation, and I was thinking about my previous department chair experiences, you know, and all of these points came up that you see on the left-hand side of the screen: inequitable, playing favorites, very exclusionary, bully type behavior, and so on, discouraging growth. And then I went to describe my my current department chair situation, who, just to clarify, that's my co-presenter here, Lisa. I work for Lisa in the letters department at Oxnard College. I realized it was a complete night and day situation. So everything of my previous workplace experience was the absolute opposite of what it is now. And circling back to my original comment when I was being introduced, these are all the reasons why I love working where I work right now, and I really love working with Lisa as department chair. So if I could get the next slide, please, and then I'll just go into a few of those bullets, bulleted points of the then and now, and give some specific examples. Okay, so I took the inclusive and collaborative bullet point. So just to talk about that for a little bit, as far as my current department chair and me being a part-time colleague. Lisa includes not just me, but all part-time colleagues that I know of to attend and participate in department meetings. I've been asked, Lisa has asked me in person pre-pandemic, when we were on the campus physically and going to these meetings on the ground, a week or 2 or 3 before each meeting. We have a meeting every month. And we would run into each other on campus or have our own meetings together in her office. She would always reiterate an email blast that she would send out to all the department about the upcoming department meeting. Are you coming? I'd really like you to come. I value your input. Your opinions are needed and they're welcome. And I come from an experience of a department chair where that wasn't the case at all. It was the opposite. I would never be individually invited on top of an email blast to the whole department. And if I did show up to a department meeting, whatever I might want to say would completely be shut down or dismissed, or even worse, it would be the humiliating experience of actually being talked over. So as I was trying to make a point and contribute to whatever, you know, was on the agenda for that meeting and some specific point on the agenda, so a full-time colleague would just start talking over me and I'd be drowned out, and they'd never circle back to me and say, okay, now what were you saying, Lisette? So it really was a night and day situation. And other part-time colleagues of mine at my previous work, it wasn't, you know, just to clarify, it wasn't just an individual thing that, oh, we don't want Lisette, you know, to come to the department. It was I noticed it was the same behavior towards any part-time colleague that would attend those department meetings. So in the end, you know, after a few years, you know, you're not welcome. You know that you're not included. And so some of my part-time colleagues would tell me, who'd also been working there for a number of years, oh, well, I don't go anymore. You know, I find other activities or professional development to do, so that I'm not, you know, embarrassed or humiliated, or, you know, I feel like I'm actually included and I'm contributing and I'm part of this team, you know, collaborative effort in moving the department forward. And that's the complete opposite in my experience as a part-time colleague here at Oxnard College. To give you another example of Lisa being inclusive of her part-time colleagues, there was a year where we were asked to vote on a course text for our college composition class, the English 101. And for it to be, we had 2 or 3 different choices to make of various course texts that were suitable for that particular level of English that we were teaching. And so the vote was for us to, first of all, each of us in the meeting to review the different texts and then give our vote on which one we had to select one out of the 3, I think it was, and then our reasons why, right? We chose that one over the other one. And I was part of that. And this is, to this day, it's the same text that we all voted on for the English college composition class. And that made me feel, I'd only been on campus, I think, for a year by then. And so it was a department meeting that followed an in-service day. And I was so glad to be a part of that because I'd never had my voice counted or my opinion counted in any of those situations in department meetings before. Okay, so on to another bullet. Let's see. Values and encourages part-time colleagues' input. I think I covered that one. Let me give you a specific example of the next bullet, shares pedagogy and course materials. And then I think I have one more slide to cover. So an example of Lisa doing that, I hadn't been teaching on campus that long, and I came across a particular reading in my course text for one of these, the college composition class I was teaching, that it just didn't sit well with me. It was about hunting and killing an animal and skinning it. And I know that there's definitely something to be said for that as far as survival, right? If there's no other food on the planet. But I'm vegetarian, so ethically I kind of had a problem with that story. And I didn't really want us discussing that in class that day. So I went to Lisa in her office. It was about a week or week and a half before that class. And I said, do I have to teach this story? I will, if you think I should. But I'd rather not because of the content. And I explained to her the situation. I said, can I still, teach another story and fulfill those essay requirements around that? It was a personal narrative story, and still fulfill, the requirements of the course as an example of a personal narrative story for the students to then go and write their own personal narrative. She's like, sure. And she whips out 2 different stories for me that were examples of personal narratives. And one of them was Annie Dillard's, an excerpt from her autobiography, An American Childhood. And I've used that to this day. And I still love that story, and my students have such a great time with it because it's such a great story of her being chased in the snow. I think I need to go on to the next slide, right, as far as time goes? Okay. So a couple of, oh, sorry, I meant to also compare that, sorry, with the previous department chair situation. as far as sharing materials. Basically, I was there for a decade and a half, my previous employment, maybe a little bit longer, and there was never one situation of any shared materials or any shared pedagogy or any kind of any support that way as far as input on how to move forward pedagogically for the best a teaching situation in your class. It never existed. If I did have a problem like that, I was never able to, the department chair never made themselves available to me on the email or in person. So it just never existed. All right, so just to talk a little bit then about the some of the other bullet points here. Praises, encourages excellence, and protect, as opposed to discouraging excellence. Lisa was so great in supporting me going back to graduate school to pursue a PhD program. Now, just to give you a little context, I had almost finished my PhD program when I was hired at Oxnard College, but I still had the dissertation to write. So I'd finished that. I'm sorry. I was returning to school for my BA. That's a problem when you have a few degrees, you get them mixed up. And so I went back. It was the communication that Lisa was mentioning earlier on. I went back to school for my BA in a second BA, and I wanted to think about my English more interdisciplinary terms. And I thought, what a great discipline that would be to add to the one that I'm doing now. And so as I went back to Cal Lutheran to do that, Lisa was so supportive of me doing that. I know she tried her best to work the scheduling around my classes. And even when that didn't work, I remember one semester when my classes that I had to go to conflicted with the teaching schedule she'd given me. She gave me a bunch of substitute teaching work, which really helped keep me afloat that semester, income-wise, which, as all of you know, when you go back to school and you work, that can become a real issue when your main source of income just gets cut off like that. So, and the last thing I'd like to say before I talk about the last point, as far as my associate chair position, why I wanted to do this, that I would like to say as far as an example of encouraging excellence or personal growth or professional growth. Recently, we were exchanging emails, during the pandemic. It's all online now, and somehow we got into a conversation about an English course text. And I wasn't complaining, but I was saying, how great this text works for these things, but then not so much for these other things. And next thing you know, I say, I should really write my own text because I know exactly what I want it to be for, page 1 to page 300, everything on there, right? And we know it's really hard to find a course text for that. And she emails me back and says, well, why don't you do it? So to compare that to a previous department chair situation, I've never had that encouragement for growth. I have a journalism background, and I used to write stories, news stories and arts features for 2 local newspapers. And I also used to review books, and then the book reviews would get published in another newspaper, just as an example. And if I ever shared, those publishing accomplishments with my chair, the response I would get, either verbally or in an email, would be, oh, that's nice. And that would be it. So again, the difference between the support and encouragement and praise for striving to make these kind of accomplishments and, fulfill your passion, as daunting as, for example, writing a course text might be. My current department chair has my back. She's there for me. Okay, next slide, please. So why I wanted to do this position, the associate chair position, just to explain, to be completely honest, I did not know it existed when I was approached by, it happened to be the acting chair because that semester Lisa was on her sabbatical. And I had just had my 3-year evaluation had come up. And so the acting chair was in my class doing the class audit as part of the evaluation. And we fell into this conversation after the class was out and over with. So it's just her and I in the room. And she invited me to apply for this position. And I hadn't heard about it before. And so she explained what it was. And to give you that context, it would be to help the chair relieve her duties of evaluating full-time and part-time colleagues during that academic year to free up their time to work on other chair duties. And so that would be my primary role, and then to also, you know, assist the chair. If there was any other way I could assist the chair, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. I would love to do that. And once I learned about it, or in the conversation before the acting chair invited me to apply for this position, I think what encouraged her to do that was I said, oh, you know, I really love evaluations because it would be so great to do look at how my colleagues do it, my full-time and my part-time colleagues do it. You know, like I wish I could be in your position, in other words, and go and evaluate other teachers because I think we all have something to learn from each other, and this is how we can all improve and be the best teachers we can possibly be. You know, even if we think we're great teachers. Right, there's always room for improvement, and that we can all learn these, you know, different tips and tricks and strategies and pedagogical things from each other, and learn. And so it's a collaborative experience. And I think, Lisa, feel free to chip in here, but I think that's what prompted the acting chair to invite me to apply for the position.
Yeah, she and I, we had many discussions, so we kind of recruited Lisette. We thought she'd be great. She has a multidisciplinary background. It's fair and equitable. It's a paid position, and we thought she would be fantastic. So she volunteered. She was voted in. We said, super, we're good.
And thanks, Lisa. And the thing that I wanted to point out in this presentation, that was the context and how I was recruited and accepted the position. One of the reasons I accepted it was because I've already been at working with my current department chair for 3 going on 4 years now, and so I felt very comfortable volunteering for this position. And I just wanted to point that out because of this very inclusive, supportive climate that Lisa creates for all of us. It encouraged me to do this, whereas if I look back on my previous department chair, there was not that climate there to begin with. So even if this position did exist, and I would never be asked anyway, but let's just say hypothetically I was, hey, are you going to apply for the associate chair position? Even if that opportunity were made available to me, I would not have taken it because it was a very unsupportive, exclusionary climate. So I think that definitely played into it too. And to speak to one other point, and then I'll wrap things up my end, as far as connecting one of the dots on Lisa's presentation about, protecting part-time colleagues from exploitation. This is a great example of that because I have learned since I found out about this position and I was invited to apply for it, that it is actually unprecedented on our campus, number one. There is no other department that has an associate chair position. And number two, it is paid, and that is all down to Lisa's hard work and fighting for, you know, the point she mentioned earlier about part-time colleagues, you know, being paid what they're worth. So obviously there's a lot of work involved. I don't know, I still have to find out how many full-time and part-time colleagues I'm evaluating this next academic year, but however many there are, that's going to be a lot of work, right? And so there's a stipend for it that Lisa fought for, and so that's a great example of protecting her part-time colleagues and making sure they get paid something for all of their hard work. And the final thing that I wanted to say about this is, without getting into details from my previous department chair situation, whenever my evaluations came around, I would dread them because I was treated very, very unfairly and very unethically. And so in a way, I feel like me being invited to do this position, it's a way for me to be there for specifically for my part-time colleagues, right? And be there for them so that the same thing doesn't happen to them. They're not gonna get treated unfairly or unequitably or unethically because I'm gonna be part of their evaluation process. So it's not gonna go down on my watch, basically. And so in that sense, I feel that's another reason why I'm so happy and I wanted to do this, was to kind of pay it forward, right? So that they don't have to experience the same horrible things that I had to experience in my previous campus. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for just a few minutes, and then we'll wrap this up. And I want to share with y'all something that I created when I became a department chair, because I found that I had a lot of people asking me about a lot of different things. And so I was doing all of this research, I was finding answers, and so being an online teacher, I thought, okay, let's build a meeting space for the department. And this was another way that I found I could include all of my colleagues fairly and equitably with access to information, because I understand that not all of my colleagues are able to attend department meetings. Some of them are commuting, some of them are at other campuses already, or like me, they might be at another job site. I have a number of colleagues who work 40 hours a week, and then they come teach in the evenings and Saturdays. So I understand that not all of my part-time colleagues can attend department meetings. So I created a meeting space in Canvas, and it's pretty lean. I mean, not lean, it's pretty clean, because all it is resources. So what I did for announcements, this was very, very helpful for us during, not announcements, sorry, discussions. This was very helpful for us during the shutdown last semester. I was on sabbatical, so I gotta say, it was not a super restful sabbatical, but you know, oh well. But what we did is we posted in discussions tons of resources for one another. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without our department meeting space. So in this regard, it was very helpful. We had a bunch of community resources. We talked a bit about mitigating trauma. Trauma is one of my areas of specialty, trauma and post-traumatic stress. So we talked about that. We have resources. Some of us shared lesson plans, lectures, because any number of my colleagues were building their online classes within a matter of days because of the shutdown. I have been teaching online for over a decade, so I have a lot of resources and I can share them. I'm happy to share. So we had the discussions that were very much used, and it's not just me. I'm very fortunate to have the cultural capital of social connections. So if any of you are familiar with the community cultural wealth capital model, I have fabulous social connections, and those are the people that I work with, and we all share with one another. So I can't take full credit, and I don't want to. So what we have in our discussions was an amazing wealth of information. So in the module section, what I created is the different links. So for example, these are all of the agendas that I've created going back to 2016. I'm missing a few from 2015, but I feel like it's okay. I was interim, so oh well. But we have all of our agendas that we've posted. We have all of our meeting minutes that we've posted. For all of the colleagues who attend various and sundry committees, I ask for a summary, so we have that. Then when I became department chair, we worked collaboratively to clarify some of the contract language for our substitute policy, our syllabus checklist, and we have a department policy on plagiarism. Since many of us in the humanities assigned papers, that one has been very useful because a lot of people plagiarize. I would get any number of questions about the contract, so I posted links to the contract, which was just recently renegotiated, so I've got new links to post. Flex information, handbook, catalog, resources for our students, for our valuable DACA students, all of our CSLOs, program student learning outcomes, general resources on OERs and best practices. And then each of our disciplines has the discipline lead that has access to the Canvas shell and can post whatever they want. Our ASL instructor posted all of her lessons for all of her colleagues during the shutdown. So she was phenomenal. And then we have all of our course outlines of record. So for example, let's say I have a new faculty member. We will be onboarding a new full-time faculty member. I can say, here's the resources, here are some suggestions, here is the course outline of record, you can look at everything. If you are all familiar with AB 705, if you're not, we can have another conversation about that another day. It was in short education reform in the state of California. I've placed our English recommendations, our placement recommendations, and our informed self-placement. Those were beasts to write. So we have all of our course outlines of record. We have so many resources, and I'm so happy that I was able to create this, because once I did, I found that my colleagues were asking me different kinds of questions, the different kinds of questions that more mentorship and collaborative type questions rather than what does the contract say? So instead of that, I can say, well, let's go look at the contract together. So I'm going to exit out of this screen, and we can go back to the slides and just conclude. So I've stopped my share, so Irene will reshare. But I also have, I don't have the time to show you, unfortunately, but I created another Canvas meeting space of other resources that I was able to share with my colleagues in all of the disciplines as a result of the mandated changes in education reform. So yes, it's a lot of work, but if something is worth doing, it's worth the work, and it's worth doing well. Do I make mistakes and stumble? All the time, and that's the discomfort. But I have plenty of people that I can rely on, and plenty of people that I can collaborate with and learn from to help me as I move forward. Irene, if you don't mind going to the very, very last slide with our contact information, that would be the best. So I wanted to share some of these things with my colleagues through Course Hero, and I wanted very much to thank my colleague Lisette for working with me, sharing her knowledge and expertise with me in this presentation and as my colleague. And I hope that some of what we've shared with you today may prove useful. So you are welcome to email me if you have any questions or concerns or feedback. I welcome all of it, and Lisette's information is there as well. So we thank you very much. And if you have any questions for us, I believe Emily is facilitating that. So we are open to your questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Amazing. You know, we've had just a wonderful discussion going in the chat here. I love all the resources everybody's sharing with each other. We had one question from Faye. She wanted to clarify which platform you were using. Was it Canvas? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I mean, we didn't have any specific questions, but we did have a lot of people sharing similar experiences and really relating to what you both were sharing in your presentation. I'm afraid I'm going to butcher your name here, but we had a professor from Argentina saying, that there's a lot of confusion around where do we report instances like that when, you know, part-time faculty are disregarded in that manner, to the Human Resources Department. And she mentioned that she had felt disregarded, and even in reporting that, felt disrespected as well. So I don't know if either of you could speak to that, that issue in particular.
Sure. It basically depends on the chain of command structure, which is usually something that's defined by the contract at the institution. So in our case, I'm faculty, I'm not a manager, so I cannot legally deal with or address any kind of HR or personnel issues. However, let's say one of my part-time colleagues came to me and said, I feel disregarded, or I feel like my faculty colleague bullied me. I'm the person, I'm the contact as the department chair. I'm the advocate for my colleagues and the students in my department that I represent. So if somebody came to me and said they felt disregarded or disrespected, that's something that I would take care of. So I would reach out, I would collaborate, I would talk to all parties involved, and I would see if we could find some kind of reconciliation or common ground. If it's a harassment issue, if it's a Title IX issue, that's not something that I am legally permitted to confront. So then it has to go up to the dean, and the dean will then take it from there. So it's, or the Title IX coordinator. Title IX deals with sexual misconduct and harassment. So if you're unfamiliar with Title IX, that's basically what it is. So there's any number of different people. We also have Title IX coordinators on our campus. But if the department chair can't resolve it, then it goes to the dean. If the dean can't resolve it and Human Resources gets involved, depending on the legalities of the situation, it might be to the Vice President of Academic Affairs or Student Services. So it just depends on the situation. But we have to go through the chain of command first.
May I just add to something that Lisa was saying on that point? Also, it depends on your school or college district and if they have a union. We're fortunate, I think, to have a union at Oxnard College. Not every college district does. They might have, like, for example, where I used to work, it wasn't a union, it was like a faculty association. It was kind of functioned the same way a union does. But that is another resource to use if, you know, you feel disregarded or have this situation going on with another colleague within your department. It's another resource. If there is not a union at your college, then whatever might be the equivalent, like a faculty association or something of that nature. I'm also thinking of the provost of the college or the university, who has to be an impartial ombudsman or a woman. So I'm just throwing out, you know, in addition to all the resources that Lisa was sharing with you, those are a couple of other resources that you should have available to you for that type of situation.
Yes.
Okay, here the dean did intervene and she was moved to the central office, so I think to be more closely monitored. But the thing is that every time we have a meeting, she tends to have this type of attitude towards me. And well, I'm thinking of maybe quitting the job if the worst came to the worst. But well.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm
Well,
sorry
thank
to
you
learn
for
that.
you talking about it, because it makes you feel, I mean, that you're not alone in this situation.
Exactly. You're not alone.
And we've all had those experiences. And I did quit jobs where I was harassed by my department lead, but I was too young to know what to do about it and too scared to say anything. So the other
that happened to me at first.
Yeah. So the other thing that I recommend for all my colleagues is know what's in your contract. Know what is written in your contract, because the contract is designed to protect you and your rights. And if you're being asked to perform a job service that is not within the bounds of the contract and you're not being paid for it, I advise my colleagues to say no. Unfortunately, I don't know your situation, so I don't feel as if I can offer you any advice of that nature, but read the contract. And, you know, I had to learn the contract by reading it as an adjunct and as a full-timer. So that's an important document as well.
Mhm.
So thank you very
Okay.
much. I appreciate your sharing.
Okay, thank you for the advice.
Yes, thank you.
So I think we have just a few minutes left. Were there any other comments or questions, Emily?
Yeah, we had a lot of great resources coming in from Michael WMA with some stats around wages and percentage breakdown with non-tenure track as well as tenure track. And then Professor T was sharing some links and resources to connect as well as some best practices around tenure track versus non-tenure track. So I'm not sure if either of them want to come on off of mute and just share a little bit, or if they had a specific question, or, you know, kind of open the floor if there are other questions that came up for people.
Thank you for all the resources, by the way. I saw them flashing up, but I didn't want to get distracted by the chat. And also, I apologize for my cat walking back and forth. I was slightly mortified. And then I saw somebody else's cat, so I felt a little bit better. But anyways, now you know my cat as well. So
Your cat's famous now.
yeah, she sure is.
She attended the Ed Summit.
Yes, I watched everything that you were saying in your presentation. Last January, I was at a meeting with Robert Reich, who's the professor underneath UC Berkeley. And I asked him this question, and I said, in Europe, the universities pay the professors a professional wage, and the governments fund the universities at about $9,000 to $10,000 per student year. And most of the universities charge no tuition. In the United States, the federal state governments fund universities at $12,000 a year per student, and then the universities charge an additional $12,000 above that average, you know, across all the universities and colleges. I said, does the Democratic Party have a pathway to make the universities, U.S. universities, efficient as the Europeans? And he said no. So it's not in the government will to do that. So it has to be done outside of government, I believe, with a movement of adjuncts and regular tenured professors. We do a charter, like charters are done in K-12, and the professors go into creative spaces like an artist residency, a film and music studio, art, bio spaces, creative writing workshops, and you take the 50 students that an average professor would teach in a classroom. With the government funding of $12,000 a year, you take 20% away for administration, insurance, HR, and all that other stuff. That leaves $500,000 for a space. You take the $500,000 and take the spaces required for a workshop. When an architect designs for a space, they design 15 square foot per student. In a COVID time period, that's too close with each other. But in a workshop, an architect designs for 100 square foot per student, which would be 50 times 100 square foot times $1 per foot per month. That's $60,000 a year. Take that away from $500,000, you have $440,000 for capital equipment and teaching staff. And now you're doing hands-on learning, project-based design, basically experiential. And their students are actually working on live projects, whether it be working with startups and business management, whether it be doing law documents with the professors as guide on the side instead of sage on the stage. And I spoke to the founder of edX, which has over 25 million students worldwide, at his last conference, and he absolutely agreed with me on the future of education, where we take the students outside of these classrooms and we put them in creative spaces like the Greek Lyceum and the Florence Medici artist residency modules. Free tuition with no more government funding, professional wages, and health insurance, no tuition. And it deals with all of the problems students come out of college with $38,000 in debt.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your contribution. I'm not really sure I can speak to it, number one. or number 2 in the time that we have remaining, but I do very much appreciate the information that you provided for us. And at $12,000 per student from the government, we don't get that. We're a small college, but the focus of this presentation is how we can support our adjuncts. But I do very much appreciate the information that you brought forward to us. And it looks like we have about 2 minutes left. Are there any other questions or contributions from anybody? Well, hearing none, I will say thank you all very much for your attendance here. It's been great to see you, I guess, or present and participate in this wonderful summit. Thank you very much, Course Hero, for having us. And I wish you all the best. Please stay safe and let's be kind to one another. Thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for coming. Oh, did Lisa go? Emily?
Yeah, I think she signed off.
She took off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Lisette.
Great job,
Have a great day.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
I appreciate everything and you having us on and all your hard work, working through all the technical snafus and everything and just, you know, getting this to make it happen. So hopefully, thank you. Hopefully we'll work sometime together in the future. I don't know when your next Ed Summit might be, but
Next year.
really? All right.
Yeah.
Sometime next year.
Yeah, I don't know what, if it might be a different topic or, you know, whatever your, what you call it, you know, your, if it's themed, right? Or there's certain subtopics within a certain theme that you want filling in or presenting on. But yeah, please keep my email handy and get me on your list and keep me posted.
Of course, we'll let the content team know, and definitely we'll stay in touch. Thank you, Lisette.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Irene. Right? They
Yes,
say it right, Irene.
Yes.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Emily. Have a great day. Have a great
course.
weekend. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.